Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm continuing my top 50 board games of all time with numbers 40 through 31. This section of the list has a few new games and quite a few games that I've done full playthroughs for on the channel. So let's not waste any time, let's just jump right in. Number 40 is The Loop. The Loop is one of the biggest surprises that I've had from any game in the last few years. It seemed to come out of nowhere, and with every play, it's just gotten better and better and better to become one of my favorite cooperative games of all time. Like a few games in my top 50, this one feels to have gone a little under the radar. I'm not sure why. It's got a great, colorful, fun look and theme. Very silly, doesn't take itself too seriously, which is kind of refreshing. And it's got this great hook with this cube tower. Now, it's a small cube tower, and all it's really doing is distributing these bad cubes across 3 different sectors. But really, the star of the loop is the card system. You have a really small hand of cards, but each card has a type, and you're able to loop those cards, basically bring one type of card back into your hand so you can use them again. And you can do that multiple times on your turn, but you have to set it up. So you can really get these great combo mega turns. It's very satisfying, very thinky. Just a fantastic, satisfying game. If you haven't looked at it or you haven't looked into it, I've done a full playthrough of this one. Go check that out. That's my number 40, The Loop. Number 39 is Anachrony. I didn't think about this, but this is another time travel themed game. Although this one is much more seriously themed. You're essentially preparing for an apocalyptic event. You know that it's coming, and you have the ability to basically request items from the future, which you can then use right now, but you have to pay it back, or else there will be these time anomalies that will show up. It's essentially a loan system, but there's a little bit more to it than that. And it's basically just a worker placement game, a very heavy worker placement game. But the cool thing is you have different types of workers. And each type of worker is better at certain actions and, worse at others, which is great. It means you have to manage your workforce a little bit. Try to hire the right types of workers to do the things that you need to do in the future. Now, on top of that, you also have this idea of your own sort of home base where you can have your workers do things, and you can build that up, build different buildings that do different things. But you also have worker placement spots on Earth that require you to put your worker into a mech and send them out to go to those worker placement spots. So you have to be able to prepare the right amount of mechs. And you need like water in order to refresh workers that might get exhausted. There's a lot of planning involved, a lot of thinking. But I think it all just comes together with the theme and all the artwork and these components, those awesome minis. It's just comes together into one of my absolute favorite worker placement games. That's my number 39, Anachrony. Number 38 is Viticulture. Now, I have the collector's edition, and I always use the new Tuscany board. Viticulture's gotten a little confusing with all the different editions and things like that, but I will always play the base game with that new Tuscany board that adds the 4 seasons, because I love the way that that changes up the game. This is another worker placement game, and I just love the theme of making wine. And it really comes through here. A lot of the actions are about getting grapes, planting grapes, harvesting those grapes, turning them into wine, and then the wine is aging in your cellars. You got to build a bunch of things. You got to build trellises. You got to build bigger cellars, and you're making red and white and blushes and sparkling wines, and then selling them or having contracts to get big sales, which is giving you income. It really works. The theme really works, and it's relatively simple to follow and understand what you need to do. It's great. And the fact that you have a certain number of workers and you kind of have to hold the workers back because certain actions can only happen in certain seasons. So you can see how everyone's using their workers, how many are they holding off for the later seasons. It's great. And it also has that grande worker, which lets you just once break that rule where, I know you're trying to block that space from me, but I'm going to put my Grande worker there and take that action anyway. Just a super solid worker placement game, medium weight, and it has a great solo mode as well. There you go. That's my 38 Viticulture. Number 37 is Sekigahara, the Unification of Japan. This is a 2-player block war game, and you're not going to see a lot of war games on this list, but Sekigahara has that ability to appeal to both wargamers and non-wargamers. It's a very special game in that way. It looks absolutely fantastic on the table. The unique twist here is you have your blocks, so the strengths of each unit is hidden from your opponent. But when you get into a battle, you have a hand of cards that matches those symbols, and you have to play a matching card in order to activate one of your units. So you go back and forth with your opponent, playing cards to activate units to then add that strength to the attack. It means there's a ton of room for bluffing, because you might come in with a huge stack of pieces and you just don't have the cards to activate them. Or you might have a really small number of pieces, but they're very strong and you have the cards ready to go to use them all in the battle. It's like a 2-layer fog of war. And then adding on top of that, there are these loyalty cards that you can play to force your opponent to play a second matching card for a unit that they've just activated. And if they can't, then that unit defects and goes to your side. So sometimes you might have the card to play a unit, but you don't have a second one and you're afraid of that loyalty challenge. Really cool stuff. It's a ton of fun. It's relatively sort of medium weight for a war game. So it's definitely one of the more accessible war games that I've played. Anyway, that's my number 37, Sekigahara, the Unification of Japan. My number 36 is Vinhos. This is another worker placement game about making wine, but it's very different than Viticulture. In this one, you're building vineyards in different regions, which give you special abilities, and then you're factoring in the weather in order to make these wines, using these helpers, all with the goal of selling and making money, but also entering them into these wine tasting competitions. Trying to score highly based on what the judges might desire for that particular contest. And it's all held together with this 3x3 action like matrix where you can move your pawn to an adjacent action, but it's going to cost you money if you want to move 2 spaces or if you're moving into a spot where someone else is. Money is also extremely tight in this game, and there's even this banking system where you have to like go to the bank and withdraw money or put in money, and there's interest and stuff. This is a much heavier game than Viticulture. Much more of a heavy Euro feel, but I really love it. Again, as I said before, I enjoy this theme a lot, and it really comes through. Vital Lacerda is a designer that manages to make really heavy games that also feel really thematic. This is definitely one of those. I love it, and this won't be the last Vital Lacerda game on the list, spoiler alert. So that's my number 36, Vinhos. My number 35 is Arc Nova. This is an extremely popular game about building a zoo, which is such a great theme. It has this massive deck of cards that are just filled with mostly animals, different types of animals. There's also some, different project cards in there and stuff. And you're just doing tableau building. You're drawing a bunch of those cards, maybe drafting a few off the board, building enclosures to house these animals and then playing those cards out, getting points. This uses that same mechanism from Rajas of the Ganges that I talked about before, where you essentially have 2 different types of points that are going around the board in opposite directions, and you're trying to get them to meet up as fast as possible. It's like a race. I really love that. It means you can pursue different strategies. But the real star of the show here is how you take actions. You have these 5 action cards in front of you in a line in spaces numbered 1 to 5. And you just choose one of those cards to activate. And the position that it is in that line is how powerful the action will be. So ideally, you want to activate the card in position 5. You'll get a level 5 strength of that particular action. And then you just move it all the way to the back and everything slides to the right. So that makes a great decision, right? Yeah, you want to activate those high level cards, but the timing might be such that you want to activate one of the lower ones instead. And you're also able to, at various points, upgrade those cards so you get even better actions. It's a really intuitive system, and I think for sort of a medium weight heavy Euro game, this one is very accessible because of that action system. It's just very simple to run and to understand. I also really enjoy the tile laying that's going on your board as you're building these enclosures and building out your park. And to top it off, the solo mode is so quick and so simple and easy. It feels like you're playing this really big, epic Euro, but in the solo game, you can do it in like 45 minutes. I find it incredibly addicting, and so I can totally see why this game has just rocketed into popularity. That's my number 35, Arc Nova. Number 34 is Dune Imperium. This is another relatively new game that has become wildly popular, and I completely understand why. It doesn't really look that great on the table, but if you can get past the sort of bland-looking board and pieces, there's a lot of Dune theme hidden in here. This is essentially a deck builder with worker placement, and those two things are integrated in a really cool way, because on your turn you're going to play a card, and that card is going to define which places you can place a worker on the board. And then it's also going to give you a little ability. So I might play a card because I really want that ability, or I might play a card just because it lets me put a worker where I really want to put it. And that's great because it's something I need to think about as I'm building up my deck. You can very easily get into a situation where towards the end of the game, you just can't go to the places that you need to go because you haven't built your deck right. You haven't anticipated needing those cards that will let you go to those places. I really like that. The cards that you're getting also have this sort of multi-use facet where after you've placed all your workers, any cards that you have left in your hand, you sort of pass, you play them all out, and then you get that bottom ability. And so that's just another decision. Like, do I play this card or do I hold it for the end of the round so I can get that secondary ability? Very cool. And there's also a combat thing happening, which I really like because it's very simple and it's not the whole game, it's just one aspect of the game. All in all, I think it comes together really great, and it works whether you're a fan of Dune or not. It's just a great worker placement deck builder. And that is my number 34, Dune Imperium. My number 33 is La Granja. This is a classic medium weight Euro that I adore because it uses multi-use cards. And these are some of the most multi-use cards in all of board gaming. Every card you can play in 4 different ways. So basically, you have a farm, you're growing, let's see what it is, like grain, olives, and grapes, which you can upgrade into wine and I think just like a cooked meal, if I'm remembering correctly. And then you can also have pigs, which you can breed, and then you can quote unquote upgrade into meat. So you're producing this stuff and you're shipping it out to get points and money, but for every card, you can either play it as a field where you've planted, one of the 3 goods, or you can play it as an extension to your farm, upgrading your farm, maybe more pens for pigs, more income, more shipping ability, or you can play it as like an extremely powerful special ability. And there's just all sorts of different things that those could be. And lastly, you could play it as just an order that you can fulfill, that you can ship, which will get you these extremely valuable trade tokens that you can use for things. Really cool. And because there's a huge stack of cards, it means that every game plays out very differently. You have so many different options and ways that you can use your cards to do different things, build combos. I just love it. This is getting a deluxe reprint, and so hopefully it'll be widely available again and back in sort of the gamer consciousness, because I consider this one a classic. That's my number 33, La Granja. And speaking of classics, my number 32 is Trajan. I'm a huge Stefan Feld fan, and this is definitely one of his most well-known popular games. At the heart of this kind of involved Euro is an incredibly satisfying Mancala mechanism. On your turn, you pick up all the pieces from one of the sections of the Mancala, and you move clockwise, dropping pieces into each section until you've placed the last piece. And whichever section you place the last piece in, that's your active section. If the pieces match the bonus token, you get to take that action, and then you get to take the action of the quadrant that you landed in. And on the board, you have, what is almost like these little mini games going on. Each action kind of feels like its own little mini game, getting you points in various different ways. But it's all about taking actions and trying to plan for future actions, putting those pieces exactly where they need to be so that you can combo the actions, you can match your bonus tiles, you can move far enough to take the perfect action at the perfect time. There's so much sort of setup that goes into it, so much thinking to manipulate that Mancala just right. It's very satisfying when you pull it off and you get these cool bonus turns and you get to take extra actions. It's got that kind of dry look and sort of dry theme to it. But there's a ton of clever stuff happening, and if you like yourself a nice thinky Euro, I mean, there's a reason why this is one of Feld's most popular games. So that is my number 32, Trajan. Number 31 is Ginkgopolis. This is a clever, very unique tile-laying city-building game. It's ultimately quite abstract, but you're doing a lot of area control on a board that the players are growing and expanding both outward, making the city bigger, but also up. And the way you do that is with a combination of essentially multi-use cards where you're going to play a card and you're either going to play it with a tile, which means you're going to be building up the city, or you're going to play it alone, which means you're actually getting resources from the buildings that are on the city. Really cool game. I actually did a solo playthrough of it on the channel, so you can go check that out. I think the solo mode works really great, and I love it as a solo game, but I also think it's fantastic at 2 players. That's one of my favorite ways to play, but pretty much good at any player count. So happy this one's back. This used to be kind of a hard-to-find game, a bit of a grail game. In fact, the copy that I had for a long time was a French version of the game. But it's been reprinted. It's back. I think it's pretty available right now, and it's one I really recommend checking out if you like tile-laying games. This is a pretty ingenious one. And that's my number 31, Ginkgopolis. So there you go. That was 40 to 31. A lot of variety in that list. 2 winemaking games, but other than that, quite a bit of variety. Some really popular new games mixed with some classic Euros. And also I noticed a ton of games with great solo modes. I think all of these games, except for Sekigahara and Trajan, have amazing solo modes that you can definitely check out. But there you go. Stay tuned for the next 10 in my top 50 games of all time. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.